Okay, Maria, thank you so much for joining today the show. And as I understand, today is Vyshyvanka Day, so happy Vyshyvanka Day to you and to everybody who's watching. We've for the first time we've met. It was earlier this year in the conference. I really liked your honest approach. For the way that you've described the situation with the Western assistance to Ukraine. I know that you're a soldier, that you fought in the front, but I think it would be useful for the start of the conversation if you can tell a little bit more about yourself so that the viewers would know better about your experience in Ukraine and in the war. So please.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to talk to you and the audience that is trusting you. My name is Mariia. I've been combat medic instructor since 2014. So I've been in the army training soldiers and medics and nurses and doctors, so anything medical. Since 2017, we have established a great system of training combat medics, which was aligned with standards of some allies like Canada and the US. This is so my pride that I can talk about is our combat medic school in Armed Forces of Ukraine and pre-hospital blood transfusion. So these are some great revolutionary things that we do in the army that save lives. I've been very happy to dedicate my life to that up until maternity leave, which I am now in. But the interesting thing that I thought about before our podcast, so please, those who watch, I want to let you know that I suggested that Gabrielius would talk to somebody directly from the front line, which is very important to hear the voice from there. The another perspective that I thought I might shed some light into is that how I perceive the combat now. And good news for me, it hasn't changed much since I left the active duty.
Could we start from the beginning? So it's a very good reminder because usually when we talk about the war against Ukraine, we mention 2022, right? Because for many in the West, not in Ukraine, maybe not those who are closest to Ukraine, the war has started in 2022, at least in our mind. And we need to remind people that actually that's not true. The first attack against Ukraine happened in 2014. And you've been a combat medic then, right? So basically you've seen the action since then, right?
I've been training basic tactical medicine. We didn't have combat medics exactly back then. But yes, I have witnessed that combat in 2014. It has changed drastically since then, but it is of course important to understand that we have been carrying on this fight since 2014, and any time that somebody questions our ability to fight and the need to provide supplies that are crucial now, the war has become very different. But we have thought when we had 0 javelins, we have thought when we had 0 foreign support back in 2014 too. Yeah.
And you talk about that the war is different, that the preparation has been different. So what changed, at least from your perspective, since 2014 till 2022? Okay, in your field, well, combat medicine. So what did you implement? What was a major change?
Well, I don't want to exaggerate when I say we have went from sticks and stones to rocket science. That is absolutely true and anytime that I think to myself, like, is that real, that what I'm talking about? We can always compare our army to Russian army, especially since 2014, because it had the same fundamentals that it stayed on in 2014. So it was having everything that we have, like heritage from Soviet times, except Russia had much more money, much more budgets on their army than we did. And the way that we moved forward is really rocket science in terms of combat medicine, tactical medicines. When we started, we sometimes had doctors, like licensed medical doctors, in the trenches because this was the only way that the army could think of medical support, like to put a surgeon into a trench. this had some very heroic stories, like a surgeon who did an open abdomen operation in the trench in the dirt. But as you know, anytime you're talking about something heroic, it means that the preparation has been not done well. So it means that what we have changed is we have made medical care closer to combat, but provided by non-medical personnel. So combat medics that are now saving soldiers' lives do not have medical degree, but they have medical preparation in the army, and they can do really revolutionary things. So we use the best that the world has to offer. We use the best methods, techniques. We do pre-hospital blood transfusions. We do very early surgical operations. And the only limitation to that is how we can evacuate. So if we cannot, like in 2014, sometimes combat was so close to the cities that we could use regular ambulances, like city ambulances, to drive a casualty like 5 minutes from the corner of the building to the hospital. Now, sometimes like a 6 hour evacuation is a very quick one. 6 hour, you must be lucky to have 6 hour 6 hour between the point of injury and the start of hospital care. So we're now very limited by drones, as you all know.
Because hospital equipment, I mean, and the cars are the targets.
Absolutely, yes. So the evac routes are always the primary targets, and this is why we have come up with methods to bring medical care like into the trench, into the I would even say like holes, like small holes that are dug out in the fields. And a month and a half ago, first blood bag has been dropped from our drone into that hole to transfuse blood directly in the field. So this is something great that has been done. I know. I mean, it's very hard to talk about these things as great things, but if you think of like this saving life and this being the best that we have to offer to our military, then yes, of course, it is great.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing your job, and with the resources that you can, and you're being extremely creative with it in order to save lives. When you talk about the soldiers that are now able to deliver, well, basically hospital level care, at least part of it in the trenches. So, are you talking about the people who have been trained by you or the facility that you helped establish?
Yes, these are combat medics that are trained in the army. So it's the civilian system is mostly responsible for what happens after the soldier is evacuated, but everything that we do until that like hospital far from the front line is done in the military by military instructors. So we have tremendous support from other countries in training our medics, but since 2014 and up until now, it's much more cooperation than only them teaching. So they are very interested in what we do as well.
I can imagine. When it comes to training of combat medics, what is mostly useful? If we're talking about the assistance from partner countries, is it equipment? Is it certain knowledge? I mean, what would you expect in this regard?
I mean, we're getting very limited in what medicine has to offer. We have tried everything which depends on money. I mean, it's not that we don't have portable MRIs. MRI is a machine which can cost up to $1 million. So we don't have portable MRIs on each ambulance, but it is also not needed. Anything that was needed and had to be tried out in the field, bringing ultrasound closer to the patient, bringing blood, using all types of best devices to stop bleeding, which is the primary cause of death in the front. We have tried that all. And some of it is now being procured by our government. Some of it is donated by humanitarian aid from European countries, etc. It's not about the money. It's because it's not weapons. Like weapons depend very heavily on money, and weapons are much more expensive. And at some point we started understanding that our biggest demand is the weapons as well, because everything which world medicine can do, we do that. We cannot do anything if we just cannot carry out a soldier because of the drones. So when we say the best medicine is artillery, we mean it. When we say the best medical care for our soldiers is covering the road out of the hell that they're in, that is true. So anything which now can help wounded soldiers is only relying on how we can evacuate them. Because as soon as we have them in our hands, combat medics, nurses, doctors, hospitals, any level of care, we know what to do. But biggest challenge is still how to carry out them from the help. So they are now in the fields, on riverbank, in the forest. These are all different types of frontline. It's just how to cover the medics who can evacuate them.
I wanted to go back a little bit, to the beginning of the full-scale invasion in February 22. Where were you back then? What was your task or work or job?
I was in Washington D.C. in a work trip with other doctors and medics, which work in veterans healthcare, which I did back then. So it was like a travel to gather some experiences from our American colleagues, and then when full-scale invasion started, we knew about that from TV and of course from calls of our relatives. And it was very natural to make a decision to return. So everybody that we have met have said like stay. They wanted to provide some help and maybe like shelter, if you can say that. But
Yeah.
I think everybody that were in that same group, we all returned to our hospitals, to our jobs, to the army. And the funny thing, we also carried 53 suitcases of help, which was collected by Ukrainians of Washington. So it was all tourniquets, first aid kits, medical supplies. Amazing story. 52 suitcases over the border.
Maria, did you return to the hospital that you've been working previously to carry out your work?
I've returned to the army that I have left in 2018, and since then did civilian healthcare jobs. And so yeah, I returned to the army to teach and to provide healthcare. So most, I mean, everybody that I know, everybody that we have been working with have returned. So we just checked up on ourselves, who is in which unit, who is where, and helped each other. It was very natural.
Probably one of the questions that normally springs up into mind of a civilian like me, and probably many civilians that will be watching, is how do you deal with so much trauma? I mean, because this is not what we've been. Any medic has never been trained for that much, for that aggressive environment, which provides so much death and so much injury and so much pain. Um, you know how does it work? I mean, how do you deal with that?
There is a saying that I very much dislike, which is sometimes promoted even in some like goodwill projects, like projects of people who wish well on Ukraine. And when people say that everybody is traumatized heavily and everybody needs care and help, etc. So my perspective on this is that when trauma touches everybody, when war touches everybody, it becomes a norm. It is very bad. Nobody wishes that upon anybody, but it is a norm across a country of 40 million people. Of course, we have less people in the country now, we understand that, but we are a country of 40 million people, and everybody, there is no person which is not touched by the war, right? So everybody has a relative, a friend in the armed forces. So many people have lost their loved ones. So many people are waiting for the people to be released from captivity. And in that case, that becomes a story of resilience and not the story of the trauma. that is so everybody who needs help should be able to get help. It is very approachable. It is very like on each step you will see some advertisements of like psychological projects, humanitarian projects directed upon that. Anybody in our job, in our profession, knows how to receive professional help if needed. But what is also important is to understand that this is how we live now, and we support everybody every day, not making like exceptions about who needs like not trying to distinguish anybody, trying to understand that this is how we live, and probably no other nation can relate to that, but many nations are helping us, even if they cannot understand the pain as we feel it, they still help. So it's important to not be angry on those who don't understand you the fullest.
Yeah, it is very difficult really to put yourself in the shoes of Ukrainian truly. I mean, just to think of it, what it is being, with everyday overflights and, the sirens and, the threat and just the country is, so long at war. So clearly, I mean, it is even for the country like Lithuania, which is emotionally very close to Ukraine, probably one of the closest ones. I believe that we don't grasp what it means and how much resilience have you built up through the years of fighting. And well, I've always say this, I'm grateful for what you're doing, and I'm grateful for the way that you fight, because you fight also for us. There is no other way to put it. One of my questions is, you alluded a little bit to it, is that at the beginning you felt that there are more countries who are coming over to give you advice and to teach, and now it's changing. How much has it changed? Do countries do really accept finally that Ukraine has built up, and not just resilience, which is emotional state, but also practical, right? So how war works today. I mean, do people accept that?
That's where I'm much more bitter because because on an emotional way, and when we are talking to people, not officially, not through governments, it's all good and we can understand each other. What I cannot understand is the this how small is the amount of defense budgets of countries who should be much more aware of the threat that Russia poses to them. What I cannot understand is that why wouldn't people of these countries, of European countries, of United States of America, question their ability to be fighting in that wars? It's it was we could not imagine how let me put that. So when we were getting familiar with the possibility, with the opportunities that other countries that are helping us with their defense capabilities, when we were getting familiar with that, we were like, wow, you can definitely win a war if you have 1,000 of this or like a million of that. But as the war evolves and develops, it becomes very clear that $1 million tank can be destroyed with $500 FPV drone, which is now being assembled in thousands on probably next kitchen to me, or like an apartment where a housewife can assemble it and send it to her husband on the front line if she wants. And when we ask these questions to our colleagues in United States, Germany, France, etc., and they seem, in my opinion, they seem not to understand the importance of this and how real it is. How real it is to fight with very cheap weapons which can be produced in mass amounts, and how it should change the whole doctrines of biggest armies in the world, of the most powerful armies in the world, of most digitalized and high-tech armies of the world. So I hope very much that there is enough secrecy on what is happening between our government and your government, German, American, etc. But even when we are talking to learning facilities, like training facilities of countries which train our soldiers, I'm not sure that they are in the context as much as they have to be. Anybody who is not believing in a threat should be very, very much rethinking their position.
Yeah, well, Maria, thank you so much. That's a very sobering thought. I have a question in this regard, and also from your sphere. So, your advice to a small country like mine, Lithuania, you know where we are, you know that our risks are pretty much the same as yours have been. You know, it's from my perspective, it's more of a question of a time and deterrence rather than the question of if whether Putin, you know, will turn his eyes onto our country. What should we be doing right now? And again, you know, maybe from medical standpoint, what would be your advice?
That has to be a well-paid job to consult from Ukrainians to consult other countries about how to live when your neighbor is Russian.
Yeah, so maybe somebody will hire you, you know, if you after after you're when you're available.
I'm very happy to share with Lithuanians what we know. So there is a broader perspective on how the country should be getting ready and prepared. So there are many questions in medical field that are important in the case your country is invaded. So the first problem a regular citizen will be thinking about is not how to organize defense, but probably how to get their medicines from the pharmacy, which is now closed, and probably they're not procured enough. And so, I mean, for a regular citizen, it's a different perspective. They will be wanting to have their old medical supplies, taking care of their elderly children, etc. But of course, if we're talking about the preparedness, I think your country is one of the best prepared in that case, having reserve
Thank you.
forces. Now that's true. Having reserve forces, so having many people who have a military experience and not being active duty. These are the people you will be relying on. Maybe not the TikTok bloggers or any other opinion leaders, which are now very popular. I believe in every country, but regular like next door guy who has served or who has that reserve that experience. Anytime when we are thinking about being ready to help each other, you should ask yourself only one question: how long can it wait until ambulance arrives? Because if it's a chronic condition, it can be painful, it can be very bad, it can be very uncomfortable. But if it can wait 8 hours in the emergency room, that's not an emergency. What is an emergency and what comes with missiles are external bleedings, which are very preventable cause of death and which many people are very unfamiliar how to deal with. So if you want to be ready, get to know what a tourniquet is. A tourniquet with a windlass, which you can turn and stop the bleeding.
So
Very simple
what you're
thing.
saying, Maria, is basically that we need then more civilians that would have at least basic training in the most preventable cases, right?
Absolutely, because even if you imagine that the whole budget of your country goes into ambulances, medical care, and army, they are never right next to you when the missile hits. You are next to another citizen, you're next to your mother, child, brother, etc. So you have to know how to stop the bleeding, open airways, carry them out of the fire or something like this. So basic first aid courses, basic first aid for everybody is the key for the country to be ready on that level. Being ready to mobilize the people into the army. Again, your story with the Lithuanian model of reserve forces is, in my opinion, the best in that case. I see that some statistics over other European countries say that they do not support their army, or young people saying openly in interviews that they will not defend their country and they will probably flee the country if the war comes. So again, you have to ask yourself, how far can you flee? And the answer is very bad, because the long-range missiles limits very clearly how far can you flee. So unless you have a tropical island in the ocean with which you can access any time of the day, you probably have to be ready to at least defend yourself and your family, if not your country, which is crazy to me, because that's the value that I have been defending the last 10 years of my life. But okay, maybe other people have different values, but a family is something to defend anyways.
And Maria, what about combat training? I mean, combat medical training. What lesson you would say is the most valuable to the countries that are currently in the preparation mode?
Very simple. When our soldiers have been trained in one of the European countries, I don't want to be specific, but it wasn't Lithuania. When they have been trained by medics, and medics have been saying something like, put on a tourniquet and forget it. What happens? Very quick lecture on tourniquets. What happens if you put on a tourniquet and forget it? The extremity does not receive blood. The extremity does not receive oxygen to live. The extremity, the limb, can be dead in a couple hours. If you do not exchange tourniquet into other means of hemorrhage control. This is what we teach our medics. This is what we sometimes teach our soldiers, because they can be out in the field without a medic for hours and hours, as you know, because they cannot evacuate people due to drones. And when some European medics, which have Afghanistan experience, and they say, put a tourniquet and forget. And our medics say, what if more than 2 hours? And they say, no, the helicopter comes.
Yeah,
This is where you have
right.
to stop. This is where
Yeah.
you have to stop, because helicopters don't fly when the drones are in. If you don't have air superiority, you do not have that quick evac. And this is something that everybody has to be very prepared to. How do you translate this into training? You teach more people to do more complex stuff. So you forget about the army guys being the dumb guys, as sometimes you can see them in comedy movies. You make the best out of what you have. Yes, in the army, which is like, our army is hundreds of thousands of people with very different background. We do not judge if they come from a background with no education. We take them and we teach them to the best that we can, and to the worst that our enemy can do to us.
Can you, very briefly, can you give a, kind of just a run through? So you have a soldier, right, with clearly no medical expertise or knowledge, right? He's drafted into the army. So what basics do you need to teach him? To what level are you trying to get him up to?
I would say he should be trained up to level of ambulance driver in some countries, which
Mm-hmm.
is a technical medical personnel.
Mm-hmm.
He cannot diagnose conditions and illnesses, but he can do the whole spectrum of first aid, which is crucial to live within the range of minutes and hours. The only different thing is the focus of our training is on, again, trauma and bleeding and so on. So we don't deal with like cardiac conditions or a childbirth. So it's all about trauma, hemorrhage, hypothermia, which is extremely important. So many people can be lost just due to cold temperatures
Mm-hmm.
and blood loss, which are very closely connected. So we teach them into a concept which is known by tactical combat casualty care. It is probably not very useful to civilians who are not combatants, but if you just get familiar with the basics of it, you will understand it's very close to civilian first aid. So if you have been into a first aid course, you have probably heard some acronym of algorithm, like what do you do first, what do you do last. So for civilian courses, it's sometimes called CABC. C, critical bleeding; A, airway; B, breathing; C, circulation. So you always start with critical bleeding. Sometimes I have heard other trainers or instructors in civilian field say critical bleeding, yeah, it doesn't happen very much, it's quite rare, you cannot see it in normal life. Oh, you will see it a lot, you will see it so much if you have combat, if you have war, you will see it all the time. So this will be the focus of the training. So any good first aid training, which is called Stop the Bleed, is a good choice to know. A first aid kit to carry with you in your car, with you all the times. Having regular medical gloves with you so that you're able anytime to provide care to somebody that you don't know, that you want to protect yourself from bodily fluids. This is something to start with, and this is something your army will start with if your army teaches you from scratch. So of course the most emphasis will be put on your how to work with weapons, etc. But this is something that I believe every commander in our armed forces knows very well. You cannot rely on medics, not because they are bad. They just cannot be far. They just can be far from you. So they are all put very big emphasis on basic medical training for the soldiers.
Well, that leads to my kind of concluding thought of this chapter is that I have a sense that this knowledge that you're talking about, that only, in my mind at least, a very few countries that have this. So if Lithuanians would want actually the latest expertise, that basically they have to hire you.
They see, from what I know, they are doing this with many of our veterans, and we see many Lithuanian volunteers here in Ukraine, and I'm so happy that they are taking that experience home and trying it out. So it's much more of my concern about the big countries that have
Okay, I
a
see.
lot of which have more people, more money, but they are not using it, not getting prepared to that's just out of my understanding.
Okay. Okay, I see. I would like to switch a little bit more to a broader context, and uh, as part of my work, I mean current work, I travel, I speak in the conferences, and in most conferences, what we speak about Ukraine, right? So there are people who say Ukraine is is slowly losing, Ukraine is stabilized as the front. Kind of my opinion, because I watch, I talk, right? So you formulate your opinion, but what I miss sometimes is that actually Ukrainians themselves would evaluate the situation where they find their country in. And how would you define the situation at the front or Ukraine? Or how bad, how tough is it now? How would you say it is?
When you're talking to an individual, you're talking to their personal experience of that day. So you can talk to a soldier from the front line who hasn't showered for a month, who hasn't eaten anything not out of MRE like bag, and who hasn't seen their family in weeks. You can talk to him, and one day he will say, I'm out. I cannot do this anymore. Another day he will say, go until the last centimeter of our border. So the individual experience is so much heavily relying on personal morale of people. What is important that our country, as our people, our nation, and our government have never changed our mind in one thing, that we are still going through that. So if we see somebody tripping because of their morale, because of their real needs that have to be covered, which cannot be covered because of the war, we just give a helping hand. This is how I see it. I've had
How do you
moments
feel?
when I thought I cannot do this anymore due to many reasons, due to understanding that the biggest terrorist country in the world is attacking you. They have more money, they have more people, and best people that you know are dying, and you sometimes cannot do anything about it. I sometimes thought I cannot do this anymore because I had sometimes very big confrontation with our command. Like, we're trying to do something new and they are saying, let's try it out. And I'm saying, hey, I am trying it out in the field now. You're sitting like hundreds of kilometers from me. You don't see the big, you don't see the picture. And they're like, but we know better because we're colonels and professors. So sometimes it was this way.
What kept you
Anytime,
going?
yes, but anytime that we're questioning our ability, we ask ourselves what keeps us going. The idea that we cannot fall and we cannot give 1 centimeter back. because they have come for our whole country. There are no negotiations, there are no treaties that can be trusted with Russians, and we know that since 2014. But we started with talking to you. So while the whole world is only now understanding what Russia is, we have understood that in the summer of 2014 when we had an agreed and overlooked treaty about Green Corridor for heavily wounded soldiers who were not fighting, who had no weapons on them, who are heavily wounded and just needed to carry out the bodies. And Russia attacked that Green Corridor. And this is why we know we have to keep fighting. It's just we don't have a choice, but it's not. I don't feel bad when I'm saying this. I feel just very determined because I know for a fact we don't have it, and we have to keep fighting. And we very much have evolved since 2014, not only in warfare, not only in our art of war, but we have grown so much as a country. When we started, we were so much Russia oriented. We didn't have so much in common with European Union and with reforms that we have gone through. When I'm saying that a life of a regular Ukrainian citizen has become better through years of war, even despite the war, we have been getting better healthcare, better education, better business opportunities, no visa regime with the EU, and this has all happened during the war. So we have mastered it, and we just have to keep going through.
How does the whole political situation now, how does it make you feel? I mean, now there are talks in Istanbul. There are countries who are, suggesting that Ukraine has to negotiate. Russians playing their games. I mean, how does it make a soldier feel today?
I don't believe that. I just don't believe that it is possible. I believe what our president and our ministers do when they are trying to do the diplomatic work, and this is why we leave this to professional diplomats and we do different things from them. But from my perspective, anytime that the Russian side talks something about ceasefire, we just get more wounded patients. So I don't, the last couple months I have not been there, but any time we had ceasefire before, dedicated to Easter time, dedicated to some other treaties and negotiations that have been done in the whole 10 years before, we had just more and more casualties. So any casualty, any person with a open wound like coming into the field hospital, we have asked them, oh, it's from ceasefire, right? So is that shell in your back, is that huge wound, is that from ceasefire? And everybody has been just making jokes about that. So this is why we know it doesn't work.
Uh, at the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned your position on the way that you've addressed the Western assistance. How does it make you feel now that there is a lot of there is a split between United States and Europe. Europe is trying to find its own way how to help Ukraine. I mean, do you see any signs of hope, or does it, where do you stand on this? I mean, does it frustrate you or does it give you hope? I would, put it in that way when it comes to any Western words towards Ukraine.
Words or
Well,
actions?
yeah, I mean, in many cases there are just words because they're promises, right? So we will impose sanctions, tomorrow. We will maybe send troops to Ukraine tomorrow.
These are talks. These are talks,
So you're skeptical.
and when we don't see it, we cannot react to that. So I shouldn't be taking more responsibility than I can, and I cannot talk about for example, shells, the missiles, and so on, because I don't work with that. I can definitely say that there was a like postponing in delivering even medical supplies, which is normally considered humanitarian,
Yeah.
non-lethal,
When was
etc.
that?
That was once when I'm very afraid to say, was it Congress or Senate? So there was like postponing something
But it was
from
recent, you mean
from the
this year?
US. Yes, yes, yes. This year. So there has already, and it has been verified by how do you say, like the warehouse that stores the
Yeah.
medical supplies. So they have verified that, and this was very frustrating to know that even medical supplies can be postponed, can be held. So yeah, it's again, words can frustrate, but you can just switch off the news and don't react to that. The actions are more important.
But realistically, what would you expect? Like, what would be the words from the Western leaders that you would say, okay, this gives me hope?
These words have to be directed towards the enemy that we're fighting with, because we don't have a problem in communication with European and American friends. We see that Russia even either doesn't have this communication,
Hmm.
or it is a friendly communication, which looks like, you know, being a fan of Putin is definitely not what I expect from a Western leader to be seen from their side. So I think these words have to be directed towards the enemy, which is not um, trying to cooperate and negotiate. So what gives me hope are brothers and sisters in arms. It's not even the troops that are talked about to be sent in Ukraine. We have discussed that a lot. And even though sometimes it seems a good idea to have more people, so many of my colleagues in instructor field were saying, "Oh my God, now train also them." So, with all due respect, with the biggest respects to our colleagues in militaries of other countries, they will just see a whole different world here if they come
Hmm.
here. They have never seen that much of damage because of drones. They have not seen the fiber optic drones. Definitely not, because they haven't been used anywhere in the world before. They will learn how to change radio frequencies 3, 4, 5 times a day, which has not been in NATO doctrines before. So
Yeah, never.
the thing that I think of very often is the writing on the wall in Bakhmut city, which is, as you know, destroyed totally now and is temporarily occupied by Russian troops. There was writing on the wall in English, which some of the soldiers did to make a photo and to send to maybe some friends in Europe or America. It was saying, "Give us the tools, rest we do ourselves." So it was one of the times when the military aid was postponed. So we just need the freaking metals. We just need the things that are that you produce. They don't hurt you. They don't hurt. They don't take you away from your families. They don't bring you tears or wounds or anything like this. Just send the metal things and rest we do ourselves, because everybody in our army is fighting, mostly fighting well.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's a great conclusion to our conversation, and I would just like to end it with Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!
Feels like an appropriate thing to say today and after what you said. And thank you so much, and thank you for what you're doing for your country and for my country as well.
Thank you so much for being such a friend of Ukraine. And I wish the best on everybody who watches this video, except Russians, of course. Uh, if that makes you go through basic first aid training, know that you can be very useful for yourself and your family, and you will be just a little bit closer to us Ukrainians.